All right. Well, I think it'll be good to check in now that it's been a couple weeks since our last check-in, and the different groups have been working on doing some more primary research. So some of them have done focus groups and a few more interviews. And then they also, this past week, were working on audience personas. I don't know if that was something that they talked about at all when you were in the J school, but it's helpful way to understand the audience that you're trying to reach, and to understand their motivations, their values, their pain points, and also how we can help. So how can your books and your content help to meet some of their needs and solve some of their problems? So I'd love for each of you to just talk a little bit about that with your research, and also how you're able to take what you learned and translate that into your personas. You guys want to start off? Okay.
So we're your group that's like doing your book covers and your book launch. And so last week we held our focus group, and it went really well. We got some good insight, some good feedback on where we're heading. Yeah. Anything else?
They really liked the book, like mock-ups that we did. They really liked a lot of them. We made them a little bit more simple, I would say. And they loved the look of it. They loved everything about it. So we're happy to share that with you a little bit later on.
Yeah.
What were some of the other takeaways that you learned from your focus group? What did they think kind of generally about the content or the books themselves?
I think just like simple is key, and like kind of it helps when they all kind of somewhat look like they were coming from the same author, you know, if that makes sense. So yeah, just
Sarah. I mean, for the books themselves, I don't know if we really talked about.
Can you speak up just a smidge?
Sorry, for the content, I don't know if we really talked about the content, but yeah, what they said, more modern. They did like consistency within the covers, more colorful. They liked and bigger text kind of thing.
Great, I can't wait to see it.
Some more, several Curtis Estes fans after you.
Yes, you just got 12 new followers.
Yeah.
Yes.
But was there anything from the focus groups or other research you've done in the last couple weeks that helped to inform your personas and help you to know kind of who you're targeting with your messaging?
Yeah, I think that the focus group kind of helped, like Clara's stepdad, like some of the books that maybe we were looking at for a younger audience. He was like, well, I would probably pick that up. Like, I like the way the cover looks. And so I think that kind of helped us, and they kind of looked at the covers and said like who they thought it might be for. So I think that kind of helped us look at what age group we should focus on for our persona.
Or by looking at the cover, what they just initially would think the book might be about, without picking up, reading the back, just what their first initial thoughts were. Which is kind of interesting to hear.
So our persona is going to be in the younger demographic, and like the 21. If we have them in like the 21 to 34 age range, but we have them being at 24.
Yeah. So I think like the Your Life by Design
is like our main what we're thinking, but then also smart money.
Yeah.
Well, and what's cool about Amazon is you can literally have, you know, 2 different versions of the same book. So there could be, you know, an age 24 version with a different cover, you know, and a 44 version. So yeah, I welcome the input and the great suggestions. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's go back to Rock Chalk Studios. Tell us about your personas and maybe anything else that you've learned from interviews or research since our last check-in.
Kind of just continuing our primary research from last time and learning a little bit more about our audience and what matters to them. One of the interesting things that we thought is when we were kind of doing our survey and a little bit into like our focus groups is that they care a lot about having something in common with the author. And so learning more about like what those things are, and how we can kind of use that to advantage to be able to market your books a little bit more effectively. And so then with our personas, kind of diving into like what's important to them, what their goals are, things of that nature, kind of been able to inform our audience a little bit better.
Great.
Thought you all did a nice job with identifying some of those specific pain points or challenges, like, so what were some of those for your target audiences?
So we have two. So we have for our kind of secondary audience, we're focusing on probably around 18, 24-year-olds kind of coming out of college, learning a little bit more about how to be like a full functioning adult. So for that, we kind of talk about time management seems to be a big problem for people, just kind of learn how to manage going from high school or going from college into like adult life, and how to have a social life by working full time and then managing those things. Another really big thing to them is self-care, just kind of taking care of themselves, making sure they have goals. And then we also talk about professional development. So getting their foot into the job market, and then how to kind of develop and move past that just entry level role. And so what does that look like? And then we have our primary audience is a little bit older, probably like mid 40s range. And so like some of his pain points would be budgeting. What does that look like financially? Taking into consideration, a lot of these people have children and are budgeting for them to like go to college and things of that nature. They're also kind of time management, and then balancing their business and their personal life, just knowing that soon if they're around 45, you want to retire around 65. So what does that look like, kind of transitioning out of that super career oriented mindset?
Great.
And specifically, which books did you think would be most helpful for each of those audiences?
For the secondary audience, we said more, like the day, well, we did like the daily devotional one because she was more like faithful and more religious. And then we also said your life by design, just because she's trying to do like the self-care and like professional development. And for the main audience, we did smart money, just so he can learn how to like balance, and also because he wants to be like a better father, I guess. We also recommended family first.
Excellent.
Yeah, so part of what we'll be doing with that here too is breaking it down into some more specifics about what types of media and platforms are each of those audiences paying attention to. Where do they get their news and their information about the world, and how can knowing that, how can we adapt the messaging to reach them where they're at on those different platforms? So yeah. All right, Flying Squirrels, tell us about what you've learned in your personas.
Yeah, so we also kind of have like two main personas. We don't really have like a strong idea of what one we think is like the main group and the subgroup, but for now we have kind of two ideas of one being like a postgraduate, kind of getting out of their graduate degree, getting into that more stable job, having a family, maybe buying a house, paying off those big loans, and thinking that, you know, they're kind of thinking of their future, really wanting to get those goals squared away, to get their career in place. And then our second one is an undergraduate who is kind of nearing undergrad graduation, and they kind of don't really know what they want to do when they get out of college. You know, are they going to go to grad school? Are they going to, you know, try to find a job? Kind of just, they struggle with having the confidence in their after school careers and things like that.
Well done.
Yeah. And anything else that you guys have learned? I know you did a focus group and have done some interviews as well, but anything that you learned from that that then helped to inform those personas?
Yeah, during some of the interviews, we talked to a postgraduate and an undergraduate. And most of them are still kind of in that, I don't see myself having kids for a while, but you know, they still want to get their career in a good spot and find kind of their path in life. So we didn't really, you know, get it narrowed down that much in the interviews, but during our focus group, we mostly just focused on the website, but they all mentioned, you know, like we are, you know, kind of thinking about what our life is going to look like after graduation. And they kind of just mentioned like, they thought the book was very interesting, but there were some things about the website that kind of steered them away from being really interested in the book.
I think like our main takeaway from our audience is that like trust is very hard to earn amongst this group, and it's very easy to lose. So just like credibility and visibility are like something that's like really important to this group, and they're not just gonna be easy to buy into your ideas or want to, you know, participate in your brand necessarily. You're gonna kind of earn their trust a little bit.
And I know part of it is people are very into, like the other group said, like self-care and taking care of yourself, but for a lot of people, self-care does not really include necessarily thinking about like finances. That is really like a stressful thing. It doesn't really make you feel that great, especially. So I think for a lot of people our age, it's really easy to just like out of sight, out of mind, and when you're at the other, like kind of ignore it until it really becomes a problem.
Interesting. Well, and again, all the suggestions possible for the website are welcome. Those are just super basic ones that we threw up. So if there are new resources to, you know, upgrade the websites or create new websites, that'd be great. And then, you know, any other suggestions across the board are welcome. The whole series is primed for a big refresh, and you're going to help it happen. So I'm super appreciative. Thank you.
So Curtis, I'm interested if there's anything from your experiences, just talking to people about the books, if when you're talking to people of different ages, if you've noticed generationally, do some generations gravitate towards certain books over other ones, or do you ever get feedback from people that changes based on their age group, like certain parts of the books that they find really helpful, or yeah, what would you say just kind of overall have you heard from your readers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Life by Design, as the class is certainly picked up on, has appeal to those that are, you know, starting their careers. Oftentimes it's a great book when people are in transition and maybe they're thinking about a new job or a new business. And then the other time Life by Design tends to be really appreciated is, you know, when they're thinking about retirement. And I think one of the biggest things that especially you know, current college students should be thinking about is retirement has to be reimagined. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the work that we've been doing in the longevity space is just showing that so many advances are occurring in healthy life extension that, you know, retiring at 65 made sense when you died at 70 or 75. But everybody I'm talking to, including, you know, Stanford professors in longevity yesterday, you know, believe that this generation of college students have a really, really good shot of making it at least to 120, if not 150. And so if you're making it to 120, retiring at 65 and then being retired for 55 years doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think the Your Life by Design book is going to have a resurgence as it helps people, you know, redefine what retirement means to them. And I think what's powerful is just the idea of, you know, living life not in terms of like one career from 22 to 65, but more like, you know, a series of 25-year reinventions. And so you do something, in one industry for 25 years, and then the next 25 years, it's an industry that didn't even exist the prior 25 years, and you spend 25 years in that. And so it could easily be a series of, 4 or 5 or 6 25-year complete reinventions of your career. And so as I'm thinking about the 5th edition of Your Life by Design, that's going to be a big part of it. And with respect to the other books, Family First for sure is super popular as soon as people start having babies. I got an email from a buddy yesterday who's a new father, and he said, "Please send me the book." And the other thing that's interesting that maybe isn't as obvious with Your Life by Design, or excuse me, with Family First, is that obviously that book is written for men to be better husbands and better fathers. But what's really great is even if a guy buys the book and just puts it on his bedside table, his wife is going to be so grateful to know that her husband wants to be a better husband and father. So there's massive brownie points just by having the book on your bedside table, even if you don't read it, because your wife, believes that, oh, my husband cares about this. That's a good thing. So there's an interesting marketing strategy there for men who want to at least be perceived as more interested in that sort of thing. But hopefully they'll open it up and get a lot out of the book as well. And then Smart Money is kind of a neat crossover book just because it focuses on money, but it's also a smidge about your life by design with the scorecard there. And then the other element of Smart Money that really has a lot of appeal is that third section. And I think the third section appeals especially to folks, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who are concerned that, they're working hard to create a lot of wealth, and yet they fear that that wealth, might disincentivize their kids. If somebody, is 20 years old and knows that they have, a $5 million inheritance coming, for some kids that could be, a disincentive. And so just the idea of, what are the things that, families can do to really encourage kids to have a strong, work ethic and sense of, motivation is really important. So we've seen a lot of interest from, successful families in that third section of the Smart Money book. Of course, the IAM book is definitely very popular within the faith-based community. And then what's interesting about Celebration of Life is just this idea of, the fact that so many funerals aren't called funerals anymore. They're called celebrations of life. And yet for most people, the first time they go to somebody's celebration of life is after they've died. And so just this importance of, really celebrating every single day as a gift, not promised to us. And so while it tends to be folks who are probably in their, 40s, 50s, and 60s who've had friends that have had health issues and like, oh my gosh, this could happen to me. I think it is a call to action really to all of us, who lost grandparents or parents. And, we don't want the first celebration of life to be after we're dead. So let's be intentional about, celebrating every single day because it is such a gift to us. So hopefully that helps a little bit with kind of the reactions that I've been getting from readers over the years.
Yeah. So any other specific questions that you have, things that would be good to know about for the personas or for any of the other aspects? Yeah. Nisha.
Yes, so because we are representing him and like we want to create a white.
Could you speak up just a little bit?
Oh, so my question is, because we're creating like a profile for you more than your books and things like that, how would you want your voice to be? Like, do you want to be represented someone who has a very authoritative, direct voice, or someone who's more on the empathetic and like more like someone who the audience can connect with.
Alex, I'm just having a little bit of
Yeah.
trouble so far.
Sure,
Did you
sure.
repeat that?
Yeah, so Anushka was saying that they're working a lot on thinking about just the voice and tone of your personal brand, like how you should come across, how you should be perceived by your audience. And so she was wondering if you had a scale, like on one end, the voice was more kind of authoritative and saying, you know, like here's what I know, I'm sharing this information, or maybe on the other end of that spectrum is more kind of empathetic and relational. Like where would you feel like it would make sense for you to be positioned?
Yeah, I love that question. That's very insightful, Anushka. Thank you for asking it. I think the goal is to be more empathetic and relational. I think that comes through clearly in Family First, where I just share so many examples of how horrible a husband and father I was. And I hope that tone, comes through in the other books. Yeah, my goal is to, feel like the reader is engaging in a conversation more than a lecture. I think that comes through with the worksheets at the end of each chapter of Your Life by Design and with the scorecard and Smart Money. So I think that's the approach that I'm hoping comes across, if that helps.
Yeah, is that helpful? Yeah, and you guys were mentioning too how important it is for readers, right, to feel like they understand or can relate to the author of, especially in this type of genre, the author of these kinds of books. If there is that empathy and that relatability, I would think that would be much more helpful in terms of the audience seeing how the strategies could apply to their lives, right? Than if it was just sort of more of a one-way, more authoritative style of conversation. Yeah.
And then also just kind of going off of that, in our research, it showed that like a lot of readers want to know like authors' values. So what are some of the values you really want to come across in your marketing?
So I think, personal values that I would want to come across are obviously, how important family is, how important faith is, um, you know, uh, a value of hard work. It's not like, life is going to be delivered to you on a silver platter. There's going to be challenges, and we need to be resilient in the face of challenges. And, the reason that I think faith has helped me so far is there's been lots and lots of challenges. The house burning down on Christmas Day when I was 11 years old, and the times when I was practically broke and using nickels and dimes to pay for gas for the car. There were so many situations where if I was counting on myself as the sole source of hope, things wouldn't have turned out the way that they did. So I think that's really, really important to come across. It's a sense of hope and faith, while also mixed with a strong sense of you've got to work hard and do your part, and take responsibility for the good things and the bad things, knowing that even in the bad things we had a role to play as part of that. I think another value that I'd like to come across is just a gratefulness, gratitude for the extraordinary, opportunities that we do have, especially, here in the United States, the opportunity to go to an amazing school like KU. For a kid from Kansas who grew up, essentially broke, that was like an amazing opportunity. And because we have these opportunities, if we take advantage of them, the sky's the limit in terms of what's possible. So I think that, another element of the books is to demystify success. I think one of the biggest gifts I was given when I came out to Los Angeles is, I had no idea what it meant to, live in Beverly Hills or belong to a country club or even go to nice restaurants. But one of the early mentors that I had, Dana Anderson, whose name's on a few buildings there at KU, he really took me under his wing, and he demystified, well, hey, Curtis, you could join a country club. Here's how you do it. Let me sponsor you. And, this is a nice neighborhood, if you want to live here one day, here's what you need to do it. And so I just think that, that's another really neat thing that I hope comes across, in different ways through the books. So does that help a little bit?
Yes, thank you.
And kind of to follow up on that question too, I know for me, Curtis, when I was reading about your childhood and your upbringing, some of those challenges that you overcame, I certainly understood after knowing that, part of what your motivation was for setting goals and mapping out a plan. And it seemed like there was a real self-determination that you had there, but you also seemed like you were able to figure out somehow that it couldn't just be you, it couldn't just be about your own success or your own goals. You also needed to be connected to and rooted in community, and to really involve good people in that process with you. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you discovered that second piece of that it couldn't just be about you and your own success and goal setting, but how did you figure out what the balance should be there between this is about Curtis, but then also actually it needs to be much more connected to others in the process?
Yeah. Well, I love that question. I think a lot of it started with student government at KU. I happened to be in Ellsworth Hall, and an upper class friend of mine was dating the student body president. And I thought, oh, that's cool. I want to get more involved with student government. And so even by the second semester of my freshman year, I was involved in student government. And so student government became a massive part of my KU experience. And so, the key, at least back then, of getting elected to student government was, connecting your platform to the student body. And so, I'd literally wait at the bus drop-off spots and just find somebody and walk with them to class and find out what was important to them and what they were interested in, and how our platform, was going to help them, have a greater experience at KU. And so I think that was a really big eye opener early on. And then I got involved as an RA in Oliver Hall, and loved that experience. And it wasn't about me; it was about helping all the other, especially the freshmen, get plugged into KU and make sure they were having a great experience. And then beyond that, because I wasn't really involved with church that much during my time at KU, but when I graduated, I knew I wanted to find a spirit-filled church. And so literally, I moved to LA 7 days after graduating from KU and got here on a Saturday, and it was a Jewish friend that introduced me to Bel Air Presbyterian Church. And so I went there on Sunday, and I figured, like, how can I get involved? And, one of the pastors said, well, you can be, a greeter. And so, a week after graduating from KU, I was a greeter at Bel Air Presbyterian Church, where Ronald Reagan, attended church, our former president. And so as a greeter, you just meet a lot of people and hear, a lot of stories and what people are, going through and challenged by. And so I think that as you know, 3 examples of ways that I got, you know, connected not only with the importance of, you know, making myself better, but hopefully making the community around us better as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Please. Other questions? Yeah.
So like, I've heard you talk about longevity a lot, and it kind of seems to be like a good point of like overlap between all the work that you've done. Like everything's kind of generally related to like stability and like longevity. So I know a lot of groups have been talking about like a newsletter perhaps, or like a LinkedIn sort of like average posting, things like that. Would you consider like longevity to be good fodder for like that sort of content? Like, are you comfortable writing about that on like a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis?
Yeah, and it would probably, I'm not an expert in longevity, so it would probably be more of, you know, me collecting, you know, insights from others on longevity and being, you know, a forum for people to access that. I mean, literally every day I'm getting, you know, this, you know, new podcast from Peter Attia or this new blog from, you know, David Sinclair. So there's a lot of information out there, but it's not, you know, consolidated in one place. And so I think to the extent that we could be a clearinghouse of information versus me, you know, being an expert might be an easier way to do that. But for sure, longevity is a through line that could be captured across all of the books.
Yeah, that's good. So, and I think that would make sense too for you, Curtis, in kind of your brand to be somewhat of an aggregator or a curator of you know, being able to point your audience towards some of the best content that's out there. So, any other examples of people or organizations that you follow in that longevity space that you think do a good job with that?
You know what? That's a great one. At our longevity dinner last week, we had the publisher of Ageist magazine. So I'd encourage all of you to check out Ageist, Ageist. David Stewart is the founder and publisher, and it's a really beautiful online magazine that really celebrates longevity. And what I love about his approach is he's not prescribing anything to anybody, but telling stories. And so each magazine really features somebody and kind of their take on making life, you know, more amazing. And then he just invites the reader to, hey, take a look at, you know, this person's experience, and if you like it, great. If not, you know, that's okay. But he's really focused on, you know, great visuals, you know, really awesome storytelling. So I think Aegis Magazine is a really, really neat example of a longevity magazine, kind of the first of its kind, that celebrates not only the science but really the beauty of you know, what a great magazine, you know, can be. You know, I'm thinking even like Architectural Digest or something like that. Like this is a really, really cool piece. So yeah, I think Aegis magazine would be a good one. And then just in terms of like the people out there that are posting a lot about longevity, probably the most prolific is Peter Diamandis. So if you want to kind of get a sense for this conversation, Peter Diamandis's podcasts and blog posts are really good sources. And again, it incorporates, you know, all the elements of, you know, longevity and, you know, an optimistic, abundant view of the future, in addition to kind of the science.
Yeah. And with this topic of longevity, I'm just curious about how you first got involved with thinking about it, reading about it, talking about it. So was it more something where you were people around you and part of your network? Did you notice people talking more and more about it? Or was it always something that you had an interest in, or was it kind of both, or how did you first start learning about it?
So I've always been intrigued with longevity. I've been in this lifetime coaching program with Dan Sullivan called Strategic Coach for 23 years now. And Dan has always been talking about longevity. In fact, he wrote a book several years back entitled My Plan for Living to 156. So here's a guy who's 75 talking about his plan to live to 156. So so that is a really interesting book, and again, one I'd encourage all of you to check out. And Alex, I can even send you the ebook if you'd like to share it with the class. But what really crystallized this is I went to the Peter Diamandis longevity conference in January of this year, and that really opened my eyes to everything that's going on in the space. And while I, thought that I would, be able to, live long and healthy, it was really in the context of, what, most people think of long and healthy. And it was, I'll live to, 85, 90, something like that. But it's very much a linear approach to longevity. Like, okay, well, my grandparents lived this long, my parents lived this long, I'll live a little bit longer. And the point that they made in the conference is that so many of the things that can kill us today are being researched in big ways, and in 10 years may be eliminated in a large part. I mean, they're literally talking about 10 years from now, every fall you're going to have your flu shot and your cancer shot, because they're working on cancer vaccines as we speak. And if that's the case, then they're able to eliminate a lot of people dying from cancer and cardiovascular disease and address dementia and Alzheimer's, then we are going to live a lot longer. And the consensus at the end of this conference was, we need to plan on the possibility of living an extra vital, healthy, impactful 30 years. So if you thought you were going to live to 90, because we're not living in, a linear, technology acceleration world, we're living in an exponential technological acceleration world. 120 is something that you've got to at least plan on the possibility of. And even if Alex and I don't make it that long, our kids certainly will, and your kids certainly will. And at this conference, one of the things that they said is that, with 400 people, many of them, PhDs and MDs from Harvard and Stanford and all over the place, there was essentially nobody in the room who doubted that the first person to live to 150 has already been born. And we just didn't know if it was Dan Sullivan at 75, or if it was the kid of Dan Sullivan. So yeah, I just think that going to that conference earlier this year really blew me away about the implications of and the possibility of living a lot longer. And then obviously the implications are, well, you don't want to be really, really old and sick, but neither do you want to be really, really old and lonely. And that's why we're creating the Anti-Retirement Club. And then the third leg of the stool is you don't want to be really, really old and broke. And so financial planning is even more important if we're going to be living a lot longer than ever expected. Does that help?
Yeah. So yeah, if you're living to 150, you might need to revisit your life by design a few times, your lives by design, perhaps.
Exactly.
Yeah. Other questions? All right. Well, it's hard to believe, but we're just looking out at the calendar here. We've got basically 5 weeks, and then we'll be seeing you and be ready to share the group's recommendations and some of their plans. So pretty exciting, and I know we're going to have a few extra guests there, I think, as well for the presentation So I know Dean Brill is planning on joining us for that, so that'll be great.
Yeah, and I just took some notes from our first session, and so if some of the topics that you are interested in we haven't dug into, or if you have further questions, feel free to shoot Alex. Hey, I want Curtis to talk more about this or that, and Alex just bundle them and email them to me. I'll reply to all of it. Emma, I know you were interested in wealth management. Coco was interested in social media. Hannah wanted to explore new channels. Annabelle, building the social media brand. Sarah, social media and design. So if there's any of the ideas that you had from, that first session that we had, which, you haven't, been able to dig into, or you still have questions about, shoot those questions to Alex, because I'm eager to make sure that all of you, get as much out of this experience as possible.
Yeah, and you all are experts now on Curtis and his brand and his books. So your questions may have even evolved since then. You might be more specific. So, but thank you, Curtis, for being willing to answer any of those questions and for being so open to all the different recommendations. So.
Well, I think this is awesome. I'm really, really grateful for all of your hard work here, and excited to recognize your contribution as we update and release new editions of the book. So thank you very, very much.
All right. Thank you, Curtis. Appreciate your time today.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.